Hello my dear friends, this is your friend Dark Fox 3.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto lived with Tayuya and built a powerful harem around her? Naruto times Tayuya, Part 2. End no start the fanfic. Next evening, Naruto, with the help of Kabuto, had figured out the distance to, and time required getting to Konoha with their current skill levels. Kabuto had also been immensely helpful with the layout of Konoha, so they would not be going in there blind, both literally and figuratively, as they needed the cover of darkness to cover them. Naruto was giving them a final briefing before they got their supplies and left. Guys, a mission like this has been attempted before on the Hyuga clan by Kumo about 3 years ago. Even when the kidnapper had the night to cover him, he was still caught. Only differences are he was known to be in the village, while we won't, and he was the top Junin of his village. Tayuya snorted. Kumo must be weak as shit then. Jirobu gave Tayuya a reproachful look, but said nothing. Naruto continued the briefing once everyone had turned back to him. With Kabuto's help, I figured out it will take us about 72 hours to get there once we leave, having only an hour to sleep a day, stopping for 2 other short breaks a day. No one complained. They were used to this kind of rough travel. Problem is, once we get there, they're pretty quickly going to find out that an Akamichi is missing and will go searching. I don't know how quick the response is, but from the second we get inside Konoha's walls, I'm giving us 15 minutes to get in, get the target, and get out. When we're out, we can't stop until we're back over this side of the border. We can't afford to fight once the mission starts, because the more noise we make, the less chance we have of getting out alive, if at all. Any questions or anything? No one moved, so Naruto nodded. We leave tonight at 8 p.m. Wear standard Oto uniform without the Hitai 8. Meet out the front of the complex. They nodded and left to start preparing for the mission. This was going to be a long 6 days. 3 days later, on top of the walls of Konoha. The trip here had been completely uneventful. Thanks to Kabuto's spying, they had avoided all of the Anbu and regular guard patrols. Naruto overlooked the peaceful sleeping village as he got up from his crouching position. He smiled. Whatever you do, don't release your seals. You know the plan. Mission. Commence. All 6 of them jumped down over the walls and began sneaking through the streets towards the Akamichi clan house, which was not too far away. They encountered no patrols, again thanks to Kabuto when they surrounded the Akamichi clan house. Naruto called over his headset. 4 go. Hi. Kidomaru jumped up onto the roof and quickly found the ventilation shaft for the building. Kidomaru was most suited for this job due to his unique spider-like abilities. Kidomaru crawled down the shaft and quickly found the sleeping quarters. He immediately dismissed the clan leader's immediate family and went for the lesser clan members' rooms. He looked into the next room and found a 15 or so year old black-haired sleeping male Akamichi. He smiled as he brought forth the chakra-infused spider webbing from his mouth and dribbled it onto the grate, surrounding it. When the webbing had hardened enough to grab onto, he lifted the grate noiselessly and placed it next to the opening. He spat 4 more spider strings out and attached them to 4 of his 6 hands, lowering himself into the room carefully. Once he was just over the Akamichi, he chewed some more chakra webbing and spat it directly onto the lower part of the Akamichi's face, his arms and legs, completely binding and silencing him before he even awoke. The Akamichi could still breathe through his nose, but could no longer form the necessary hand seals to perform any of his clan jutsus. Kidomaru released 2 more webbing strings to pick the Akamichi up and then pulled him back up into the rather wide ventilation duct. He dared not risk placing the Akamichi down in case he started thumping the vent and caught the other's attention, so he held the overly large boy still with 4 arms while he replaced the grate and destroyed the chakra webbing, deleting all traces that he had been there bar the now empty bed. He silently crept back along the vent shaft and out onto the roof to see 5 familiar figures there. They nodded to each other and replaced the grate before leaping away, melding into the shadows. It would not be long before the Akamichi found they were missing a member, and search parties would be sent out. Once they passed the walls of Konoha with their target, Kidomaru looked at Jirobu. "Oi, Jirobu, carry this fat ass, he's heavy." Jirobu nodded and took the still thrashing child. Naruto could see the child was desperately trying to get free, causing Jirobu to fall behind so he could readjust and not let him fall. Naruto sighed and looked at Gaara, who nodded. Gaara looked back at their target. "Akamichi, listen well. If you cause our team any more problems, we will kill you. It makes no difference whether we get an alive Akamichi or a dead one, as long as it's in one piece when we get there. It would be very easy to control my sand to block your nasal passages. With your current rate of respiration, you would die within 30 seconds from lack of oxygen. Keep still or I will kill you." The Akamichi weighed his options and resigned to his fate. Gaara nodded. "Well chosen." They continued to race away from Konoha. Naruto saw Tayuya was looking at him and was about to open her mouth to speak. He held out a hand. "Wait." Naruto looked at Kidomaru. "Cover his entire head bar his nose. I don't want him listening or lip reading if he's capable of it." Kidomaru nodded and spat a thick blanket of webbing around the Akamichi, leaving everything covered bar his nose. Naruto looked at Tayuya, who spoke. "First time back in Konoha, right?" Naruto sneered in disgust. "I still hate the place." Tayuya snorted. "I can see why. There's no way in hell those shitheads can raise a ninja in a village like that. I bet their academy graduation exam is to make a bunshin." Naruto laughed, causing the other 5 to look at him. "Spot on. The final test is to make a bunshin, if I remember what that old fart of a Hokage told me when I lived there." Gaara recounted what Suna required. "Suna requires you to best an experienced genin in combat." Tayuya looked at Gaara. "Kill them." Gaara looked at her. "Killing is allowed, but not recommended." Tayuya shrugged. "Better than a bunshin." The others agreed readily. Behind them, they faintly heard the village alarm go off, making them curse. "Shit. How did those bastards find out so quickly?" They looked at the Akamichi. He was completely motionless and still breathing. His chakra was being absorbed by the chakra webbings, so they did not find out from that. They couldn't worry about that now. All they could do was pass over the border to political and physical safety. Naruto's eyes set into a hardened gaze. "We're speeding up. We have an hour's lead, tops, assuming they get our trail first try. Don't use cursed seals unless you have to. Let's move." All of them sped up, not wanting to be caught by the enemy and be grilled before being put to death, none more so than Naruto. They would most likely send out the Anbu first, and then the tracking specialist clan, the Inuzuka. If the Inuzuka caught up to them, even if they escaped, they would never be able to return to Konoha again without being immediately found out. This was going to test their abilities to the limits. Next morning, all of them had eaten a soldier pill to regain their strength and keep moving. The Sound Six and their captive had covered almost half the distance already. However, they were certain they were being followed by at least 4 people. Those 4 were rapidly gaining on them. Naruto signaled a halt. Within the minute, the 4 caught up. It was no surprise they were 2 Inuzuka and their companions. The elder male whistled in respect. "You 6 aren't bad to get in and out of Konoha and escape us for half a day at your age, I'll give you that. However, your luck ends here. Hand over the kid and stand down and we might let you live, maybe even work for us if you're good. Naruto paled visibly and had to restrain from shuddering. I've had enough of Konoha to last me a lifetime, thanks. Still, now you've found us, we can't let you report back. I have nothing against Inuzuka, but business is business. Naruto straightened and sighed. Let's finish this. Jirobu, hold on to the fatty. You let your guard down for a second, they'll take him back and we will fail the mission. The rest of us, release our first stage Kekgenkai. We'll draw everyone from this part of the fire country, but we have no choice against two Junin and their companions. While they were on missions, their cursed seals were referred to as Kekgenkai, to protect the secret. The Junin's smirk turned into a calculative glance, which turned into a full-blown look of horror as they began releasing the first level of the cursed seals. Gaara's body was surrounded by black sand with purple veins, giving him the look of a tanuki. Naruto's fingernails sharpened into claws, his teeth grew into fangs, and his hair grew unruly while his whisker marks darkened. They stumbled back under the sheer amount of rage, hatred, anger, killing intent, but most of all from the pure smell of death and decay they exuded with their chakra. Naruto snarled at them. All of those with a Kekgenkai that is not a Dujutsu are hated, feared and detested for their abilities. We are hunted ruthlessly for what we cannot control, nor have a say in. Feel our pain. The Junin and their canines cried out as they were torn into by all 6 of the children, who did not listen to their cries of pain and eventually pleas for mercy. Once they were sure that they were well and truly dead, they stopped using their cursed seals and turned around. Naruto formed several hand seals before launching a ball of fire at the corpses, incinerating them, and turning to leave with his team. 2 days later. Apparently, they had evaded Anbu or even tracker pursuit for the lat 2 days. Tayuya snorted. Konoha really is weak as shit. Only sending 2 Junins after us. They're probably shitting themselves now. Naruto and Kidomaru felt something was slightly off. If anything, they should have felt the presence of at least one chakra signature of Chunin level or above, but they hadn't even detected a normal person, let alone a platoon of Anbu. As dusk on the 2nd day settled, they found out why. Tayuya smiled. See. Weak as shit. I don't think so. They came out of the bushes to find a squad of Anbu members, and judging by the canine companion of one of them, one was an Inuzuka. Naruto silently cursed himself. He should have known they would be faster than them and would likely block all borders to cut off their escape. The Inuzuka female growled. You're those damn brats who killed my father and sister. You better believe you're going to pay for that. Everyone in Naruto's party except Tayuya's sweat dropped and looked at the sole female in their party. What are you idiots looking at? Naruto shrugged as he thought up a plan to try and fool their opponents. Doesn't matter. What does is that these guys are going to be damn tough. We really don't need this, considering we have to get past those Oto nins again even if we get past here. One of the Anbu focused on Naruto. Oto. Naruto looked at him in a disinterested fashion. Yeah, Oto. Didn't hear me the first time. The Anbu disregarded the remark. You do realize that even though you've killed 2 Junin of Konoha, you're no match for us, right? Just give up. Naruto laughed, catching the Anbu off guard. If we kick there with 1/10 of our power, what makes you think you'll survive? Naruto could see them get into battle stances and he looked at them as he smiled. Full 2nd stage Kekgenkai. That caught the Anbu by surprise as the 6 kids in front of them began to release a substantial amount of power. After they had released stage 1, Naruto opened his eyes and grinned ferally at them. Stage 1. Released. Stage 2. Kai. The Anbu stumbled back from the sheer emotionally laced chakra the children were releasing. It was filled with hatred, loathing, sadness, pain, killing intent, sickness and death. They all gasped as each child's individual tattoo-like pattern glowed and covered their skin, while their other physical features morphed to resemble various kinds of demons. Naruto snarled at them as his black chakra condensed around the middle of his 9 tails. One of the Anbu pointed at Naruto with a trembling finger. It's the Kyuubi brat. Naruto grinned before disappearing, reappearing with his claws penetrating the Anbu's armor. It seemed that the carnage the Kyuubi was capable of causing was still fresh on their minds. However, the 3 remaining Anbu quickly noticed Gaara growing out of proportion. They looked up in horror at him as he towered over him and the surrounding landscape. They looked up at him. Wah! What the hell is that? Naruto grinned. That, humans, is the weakest of the demon lords, the Shukaku. Naruto had intended to aim low with the emphasis on humans, but due to their massive amounts of fear, it was lost on them. All of them suddenly froze when a lilting melody wafted through the air. By now, their emotions were so out of whack, they couldn't think straight, and dispelling the genjutsu was the last thing they thought about doing. Naruto looked back at Tayuya and smiled. She was thoroughly enjoying tormenting these Anbu with whatever demonic illusion she was using. It was then that Kidomaru played his part and spat out his golden spider war bow. This one was slightly different, though. This one had 4 nooks to slot arrows into, meaning 4 shots instead of 1. All of them could tell the others were running out of chakra, so this was going to be a quick, clean kill. Kidomaru spat out 4 arrows, 1 for each remaining Anbu and 1 for the Inuzuka's canine companion. He pulled all 4 back and shot each of them through the head, not risking letting them live for any longer than strictly necessary. The Anbu were so caught up in their terror they didn't see the arrows piercing their heads until it had actually happened, at which point they were dead. Naruto formed a massive fireball, again incinerating the Anbu's bodies. They say, dead men tell no lies, but in this line of work, there was no such thing as truly dead men. Naruto and the others released their cursed seals, weakening at the knees as they returned to their true forms, almost completely drained of chakra. Naruto motioned them forward and they jumped onto the Shadaime's head, onto Uchiha Mandra's head, and over the border to freedom. No one that had seen them was left alive, so they were fine as long as they got out of sight of the border before they decided to rest. They'd more than earned it, considering their mission went as close to without a hitch as physically possible. 5 years later, Orochimaru's office. The Sound Seven had assembled in front of Orochimaru at his request. He smiled at them. They were no longer children. They were matured weapons of war. I believe it is finally time to put my plans into action. During the coming Chunin exams, we will invade Konoha. The other's eyes widened while Naruto had to stop himself from hugging his leader. Orochimaru smiled at Naruto. I always keep my promises, Naruto-kun. And now is the time to fulfill the promise I made to you. Naruto had to stop himself from full-blown maniacal laughter. Revenge. Orochimaru's eyes lit up. Indeed, Naruto-kun. And you 7 will be my main pieces. For these exams, each of you will have a specific duty. Kidomaru-kun, Jirobu-kun, Sakin-kun, Tayuya-chan. You 4 will be guarding me while I personally kill the Hokage. Naruto-kun, Gaara-kun, you will be leading the 2 parts of the invasion force. Kimimaro-kun, you will be assisting me with the Hokage. To give us the cover we need, we are sending 3 genin teams to compete in the exams. Up until the invasion commences, Naruto-kun, Gaara-kun and I will be their stand-in Junin-sensei's. However, for the main matches, to get close to the Hokage, I will need to assassinate the Kazekage and impose as him until the time is right to strike. Gaara smiled slightly at the mention of murdering his father, the cause of his early childhood anguish. This was the first part of his revenge. Orochimaru-sama, I wish to be present when my father is killed. Orochimaru smiled and chuckled slightly. But of course, Gaara-kun. Orochimaru looked over each of them before smiling with a glint in his eye that promised those who stood in his path pain. We leave tomorrow morning at dawn. They nodded and left the room to gather the things they needed for the invasion. Naruto fell into step beside Tayuya as he remembered what had happened over the last 5 years between them. For the last several years, they had steadily grown closer. Up until they had hit puberty at the age of 9, they had pretty much been close friends. Once they hit puberty, however, as Sakin had put it so well, all hell broke loose. Tayuya had woken up much grumpier than usual one morning not long after her 9th birthday. When Sakin asked if it was that time of the month, he immediately regretted it when she slammed him into the wall with a power that made even Naruto jealous. A few weeks later, Naruto had been talking with them when his voice cracked, making everyone but Gaara howl with laughter. Even Jirobu couldn't help it and joined in. Naruto scowled at them and blushed beet red, mentally promising them multitudes of pain later. However, both Naruto and Tayuya were finding it rather hard to be around each other without something happening. Both of them would either catch themselves or even worse, would have others catch them staring at the other. After that, they were finding it increasingly hard to have a decent conversation without it ending in an embarrassing situation. Back in the present, Tayuya smacked him over the head with her genjutsu, bringing him out of his trip down memory lane. Oi fox boy, I'm talking to you. Naruto snapped to attention. Huh. Tayuya snorted as she faced forward and kept walking. You're going to enjoy this, aren't you? Naruto's eyes lit up and he cracked a wide smile at the thought. Definitely. They'll find out what Konoha's favorite demon can do when he's pissed off. Tayuya couldn't help but smile at Naruto's expression. It was that of someone who was going to get sweet revenge and thoroughly enjoyed doing it. Several days later, Orochimaru and the Sound Seven were racing through the forests of the Fire Country to the meeting point. They slowed as the forest stopped abruptly and they came out onto a cliff overlooking Konoha from the south. Standing there was Kabuto, who turned to look at them, giving his usual over-friendly smile. Good to see you made it, Orochimaru-sama. Orochimaru smiled as he gave a brief glance at Kabuto before looking over his unsuspecting prey. Orochimaru had his Junin disguise on, which he would be wearing for the remainder of the time here up till the time the Kazekage was assassinated. Naruto and Gaara had undergone some physical changes as well to keep anyone from recognizing them. Naruto's hair had been dyed platinum blonde as well as changed from neat spikes to messy spikes, while his whisker marks had been carefully hid with a genjutsu that would only release once he removed it himself. He wore an Odo Hitai 8 as well as a Junin vest over black baggy pants and a long-sleeved shirt. His normally piercing blue eyes were now blood red with the help of a genjutsu. Gaara had changed his hair color from blood red to copper red, changing his hairstyle from messy to neat spikes. A genjutsu hid the marks of insomnia around his eyes while his normally teal irises were now canary yellow. He wore the same outfit as Naruto and Orochimaru. It's finally come. The annihilation of Konoha. Orochimaru smirked as he looked at the Hokage monument, or more specifically, the third face on it. Sandame, I'll make you pay. With that, Orochimaru gave Kabuto several instructions before the bespectacled spy went back to Konoha to carry out his master's instructions. Orochimaru turned to his direct subordinates. All of you except Naruto-kun and Gaara-kun take up your positions and wait for further instructions. They nodded and disappeared, leaving Gaara, Naruto and Orochimaru to wait for the three Oto Genin teams to arrive. After several minutes, they came into view. Orochimaru smiled as he and his two bodyguards flickered down to just in front of the 9 genin. They stiffened slightly before standing to attention. Orochimaru smiled and chuckled. We will be your Junin senseis for the duration of the exams. Don't fail us. Hi. Orochimaru took position behind the center genin team, which consisted of a massive boy with brown spiked hair and black eyes, a slender girl with shoulder-length black hair and hazel eyes and another, normal-sized boy with brunette hair cut into a crew-cut and piercing green eyes. All three of them wore some variation of the standard Oto Genin uniform. Gaara's team was the same as Orochimaru's team, 2 boys and a girl. Naruto's team recognized him immediately. Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened before they narrowed. He had seen Zaku around on occasion and talked to him once, but when it came down to it, Zaku was still his subordinate. Zaku, while we may be acquainted, it would be best to refrain from using our first or last names here, considering how they would kill us on sight. After all, I don't want Konoha finding out I've returned until it's too late. Zaku nodded. Sorry. Naruto shrugged it off while Dosu looked at Konoha and back at Naruto. This is your village of birth, sensei. Naruto sneered, which they took for a yes. Zaku smirked. Doesn't look like much. Naruto chuckled darkly. Which is exactly why I left it. Konoha's a great place if you're an average person, however, for those of us who are not normal, it's hell on earth. Orochimaru smiled at Naruto's unusual description. How surprisingly true. With that, they approached the south gate. The guard nodded at them. I assume you're here for the Chunin exams. Orochimaru nodded and the 12 of them showed their passes, which the guard gave a casual check over and nodded. You're fine. Please enjoy your stay in Konoha. Naruto and Orochimaru smiled as they imagined their town of birth in flames. We will. With that, the 3 genin teams entered Konoha memorizing everything for the attack. Naruto could sense several ninjas of genin level trying to pitifully conceal themselves while scouting them. Naruto looked to Orochimaru who smirked. Naruto looked back to his makeshift team. You 3 go and have some fun. Don't cause trouble though. They smirked and disappeared. Gaara looked at his team. You too. They nodded and disappeared. The last team saw the look they got from Orochimaru and disappeared as well, leaving the 3 senseis to find a place for them to rent until it was time to commence the plan. That night, in the hotel, Orochimaru, Naruto and Gaara were addressing the 9 Oto Genin on their real mission in their hotel room. Our purpose for coming here is not to have you pass the Chunin exams. That is merely the cover we are using. The 9 genin's eyes widened. Naruto continued the explanation. While Orochimaru-sama's and Gaara's team will compete like the other teams, my team will have a special mission. You are to find Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha and kill him. He is an obstruction to our plans and must be dealt with. The 3 of us will be taking part in the second test to complete our part of the mission. On the start of day 5, either Gaara or I will check up on your team for status reports, depending on who finds you first. Do not seek us out or talk about us to anyone else in the exam, even to each other. We cannot risk being caught early. Are there any questions? The 9 genin shook their heads. So Orochimaru smiled at them. Live up to my expectations. All of them bowed and went to their own rooms, completely unaware of how their mission was nothing but a front for the real mission. 2 days later, Orochimaru had called the Sound Seven as well as Kabuto to him just after the first exam, saying it was time to put the next phase of the plan into action. They met Orochimaru near a graveyard where Orochimaru pointed to their targets. Naruto and Gaara released their partial disguises in case someone was spying on them, and the Sound Seven as well as Kabuto charged out at the unsuspecting Grass Genin. Kimimaro pulled ahead of the pack and stabbed each of them through the chest with a bone sword, killing them with ease before the others got there. They admired Kimimaro's handiwork while Orochimaru came into the clearing. "Thank you for waiting." After he said that, Kimimaro brought a hand up to his mouth and coughed once. When he removed his hand, he saw he had coughed up blood. The genetic disease is taking effect. Kabuto looked at Kimimaro with mild concern. "Is something wrong, Kimimaro-kun?" Kimimaro let his hand fall to his side and regained his stoic facade. "No, nothing's wrong." Orochimaru smiled at the work. "Good job, Kimimaro-kun. Naruto-kun, Gaara-kun, you will assist me during this part of the exam. Take their faces." They nodded and each of the three walked up to a corpse, performing a jutsu to steal their identities. Once they looked back up, they had taken on their appearance and used a multi-layered henge to change their clothes to that of their targets. Orochimaru turned to the others. "Scour the area to make sure we were not caught and then return to your posts. Naruto-kun, Gaara-kun, we're going." All of them nodded and began performing their assigned duties, leaving the bodies of the Grass Genin sprawled there, unconcerned about others finding them as they headed to the second test. Not too far away, at Training Area 44, Orochimaru's team arrived with many others who had passed the first exam. They were pleased to see all three Oto teams had passed the first test. Naruto looked among the Konoha Genin his own age. He didn't recognize any of them from his time in Konoha, but from Kabuto's information, he knew of them. He looked over the teams before he came to a team with a raven-haired Uchiha who was the target for this part of the plan, a pink-headed girl the Ninfo cards identified as Haruno Sakura, and then the last was a brown-haired boy with 2 orange tattoos on his cheeks, somewhat similar to an Inuzuka. However, the Inuzuka clan tattoos were red, as well as pointed at one end. These were orange and rectangular. Naruto smirked as he thought to himself. "Knowing how I would have turned out if I'd stayed, that would probably have been me and I'd probably have a crush on that pink-haired fool." Naruto restrained from shivering, shaking his head as he concentrated on the task at hand. The examiner sparked his interest. It was the very first person Orochimaru had given a cursed seal to that had survived. Mitarashi Anko. As Anko began trying to instill fear into the Genin, the brown-haired boy on Konoha's Team 7 did an imitation of Anko and scoffed at her. "You'll have to do better than that to scare me." Anko smiled sweetly, covering up her true intentions. "Urara, aren't you a brave little one?" Anko slid a kunai into her hand from her coat sleeve and in the same motion, hurled it at the boy. It whistled past him and just cut his cheek. However, Orochimaru happened to be standing in its direct line of travel, and moved his head out of the way. However, his hair did not move with him, and the kunai cut a strand of hair off. Naruto and Gaara smirked. Orochimaru got very touchy when it came to his hair, especially when it was cut. Most of the Genin were focusing on how Anko was directly behind the boy. "Boys like you die the fastest. After spilling the red blood I love so much all over the place." Anko was about to lick the blood off his cheek when she pulled a kunai out of her other sleeve and was about to stab the person behind her when said person extended to what most people would consider a disturbingly long tongue that wrapped around the kunai she had thrown. "Here's your kunai." Anko smiled as she took it while everyone else except Naruto, Gaara and Anko became wary of this grass nin. Ah, thank you, but don't stand behind me like that, if you want to live. Naruto and Gaara had to practically choke themselves to keep from snorting. Kill Orochimaru. That never would or could happen. Anko took the knife and Orochimaru withdrew his tongue. Well, I get agitated when I see blood. My precious hair was also cut, so I got a bit excited. Orochimaru started walking back to his bodyguards, stepping up to the Haruno who gave way to him with a look of something akin to morbid fear plastered on her face. Anko smiled at the genin. It looks like there are a lot of hot-headed people here today, this is going to be interesting. Anko walked back to the gates and pulled out a stack of consent forms. Before I start explaining the second test, all those participating will have to sign these. Since Orochimaru's team was not here to take the exam, they tuned out as Anko explained the rules. Once they had signed the consent forms, they were called up to the stand where they were given a scroll of earth and told which gate they would enter from. After they got to gate 15, they squatted into a half-sit half-lean that would allow them to spring forward at a moment's notice. Naruto looked at his leader from under his coolie hat. So, we're going after the rookies first, right? Orochimaru looked at Naruto. It seems we can kill from here on, so it will be easier for us. At 1 minute till 2 p.m., the examiners at each gate unlocked the gates and stood back. Anko counted down the last 10 seconds before she called over her headset. We will now begin the second test. The gates flew open and Orochimaru's group charged in. Orochimaru held down his coolie hat so it did not blow off from the speed they were traveling as he gave out his orders. Find the kids. Naruto knew the ones Orochimaru was talking about. Those three, right? Naruto took Orochimaru's lack of an answer for a yes, and they ripped through the forest at a speed that if someone had seen them would have instantly been able to tell they were nowhere near genin level. Several hours of searching later, Orochimaru sensed the Uchiha not too far away and motioned both of them to wait while he used a jutsu to sink into the ground and sneak up to them to listen into their conversation while the other two stayed back. If the three of us get separated, don't trust anyone even if he looks like us. There's a possibility that one of them might transform into one of us and approach. Both of his teammates agreed while the Haruno spoke. Then what should we do? Let's decide on a password. The third teammates groaned. I hate passwords. If a different password is given, assume he is an enemy no matter what he looks like, got it? At that point, Sasuke detected the presence of Orochimaru, but did not show it. Listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once. First, you will ask, the ninja song, Ninki. The answer is the following. It is a good chance if a large number of enemies are making a scene, there are no hideouts even in a quiet place. It is important for a ninja to know the right time, the time when the enemy is tired and lets his guard down. That's it. The Haruno smirked. Got it. The other boy mumbled before turning around. Yeah, got it, I guess. Sasuke stood up. I'll keep the scroll. The third member of the team was starting to get up. Oi, Sasuke. He was stopped when a piece of bark skimmed his cheek, making a shallow cut. He pressed his hand to his cheek as a trickle of blood oozed down and then looked in the direction it had come from. What was that? A distant rumbling and whistling sound could be heard from the direction Team 7 were looking in, which quickly got louder before they were enveloped in a massive gust of wind. A new enemy. All of them covered their faces with their arms before the wind exploded, sending a massive cloud of dust and debris high into the air that was visible from anywhere in the training ground. At the point the blast of wind originated, Orochimaru smirked. You two go have fun somewhere else. I will handle this alone. Naruto smirked. Save some for me later. Sure. While they were in this exam, it would be wise not to reveal who they were, especially Orochimaru, so they addressed each other informally and never mentioned their names. Both Naruto and Gaara disappeared from sight to go and vent some excess energy of their own on some groups of hapless genin, leaving Orochimaru to deal with Team 7. Naruto looked at Gaara, who was smiling as well. You want to handle the Suna teams? Yes. You will be taking care of the Konoha teams, correct? Yeah. I'll see you at the tower. Both of them split up to go and have fun with their own former village's teams, happy for a minor amount of revenge before the mass carnage that would be unleashed during the main matches. With Naruto. Naruto had gotten lucky and found a team of Konoha genin within half an hour of searching. Not surprisingly, he didn't recognize them, so they were literally nobodies. He jumped down in front of them, making them go on guard. These kids would have been about 4 years older than him. They smirked at this lone grass nin who had a death wish. Not exactly smart taking 3 of us by yourself, are you? Naruto smirked. Who said I need my teammates to kill you? Both of them are having fun with other teams now. The Konoha genin got into defensive stances, pulling out a kunai each. Naruto sighed and formed a single hand seal, beginning to melt into the ground. The Konoha genin looked at him in fear as he just seemed to melt into the ground like it was some sort of quicksand. After he disappeared, they began looking around to see where he would attack from. What they didn't expect was that the ground underneath them heaved upwards and a massive explosion came from underneath them, much like an oversized landmine. The genin flew into the air before crashing back to the ground, groaning and trying to get up. They heard someone land in the middle of them and just saw the grass nin standing there. Who are you? The grass nin smirked as he walked up to the one who had talked and picked him off the ground by his collar. Why should I give my name to a dead man? Then again, I guess the soon-to-die finds some sort of comfort in knowing who killed them. However, given how Konoha has treated me, I don't think they deserve even that right. Naruto changed his grip on the genin so that his hand was now crushing his neck. The Konoha genin's eyes bulged as his supply of air was cut off. The other two were staring in horror and then started retching when Naruto snapped his neck. Bearing witness to Orochimaru's methods of killing made this seem tame by comparison. He dropped the lifeless genin's body to the ground and turned to the others. One of them took out his team's heaven scroll and placed it on the ground in front of him and began trying to get away. Take our scroll, please don't kill us. Naruto laughed as he approached the genin. Naruto stopped as the Kyuubi gave him access to his early childhood memories, or at least, one in particular. It was him on his 3rd birthday, being beaten by the regular group. And this kid was one of them. He snarled at the genin and walked past the scroll, grabbing the genin and hauling him to look at his face. I remember you. You're one of the bastards who I'm specifically here for. This is going to be fun, breaking every bone in your body and hearing you scream in agony. The genin's eyes widened. But, I've never seen you before. Naruto smiled sadistically. Technically, he hadn't seen this body before, but that changed little. He saw that the last genin was trying to make his escape. He formed a cage bunshin who chased after the last one and lodged a kunai in the back of his head. The cage bunshin dispelled, leaving Naruto to deal with the last one. The genin looked at Naruto in pure and utter fear. You're not a genin, are you? Naruto smirked. No, technically, I never even graduated the academy. Now, I don't want to listen to your stupid questions anymore. Let's hear something else. Naruto took his free hand and grabbed the genin's lower leg. The genin screamed as Naruto gave his leg a savage twist, snapping the bone. The genin took one last look at Naruto and fainted from the pain. Naruto looked at the genin deadpanned. I'm starting to wonder why I was ever scared of Konoha. Now that the genin would not scream in pain, Naruto picked up the deposited heaven scroll and pocketed it. Although he himself would not use it, he had a feeling that his genin team would. He placed an explosive tag on the still technically alive genin's chest, activating the tag and walking away. He smiled as the clearing exploded, getting rid of almost all traces of the Konoha team. He leapt into the trees to look for another team to kill. With Gaara. Gaara had just finished up playing with a Suna team who provided him with several minutes worth of entertainment as he crushed each of their limbs one by one with his sand. It was now late afternoon on the second day. He had both a heaven and earth scroll from the two Suna teams he had killed. He decided on what to do next when he felt a pulse from his cursed seal go off. He sighed as he pocketed the earth scroll and went to find Orochimaru and answer his summons. That evening with Orochimaru, Orochimaru had deemed the last Uchiha of Konoha just worthy of receiving a cursed seal. He was currently sinking into a tree to get out of the area when he felt a familiar presence nearby. He opened one eye and saw who it was. Hisashibari Dana, Anko. Anko stepped up and glared at her former sensei and the bane of her existence. Orochimaru. You are an extremely dangerous S-class wanted criminal. That's why I'm going to kill you, even if it costs me my life. Anko flinched as she heard laughing from all around her that was not from Orochimaru. Two figures appeared in front of her target and she paled when she felt cursed seals on both of them. The broad-shouldered one smirked. What makes you think you can kill Orochimaru-sama when you can't even kill us? Anko glared at them. Who are you two? Orochimaru smiled as he reversed his merging with the tree and stood behind them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. Anko, I would like you to meet your replacements. They are everything you were not: loyal, intelligent, and most of all, powerful. I would love to deal with you, but I believe I should not rob my subordinates of that pleasure. Fight them, and see what you could have been. Anko sneered at them. Completely brainwashed, how pathetic. Orochimaru laughed, causing Anko to look at him. What's so funny? Orochimaru smiled at her. These two are exceptional. They managed to awaken the second-level seal via suicide pill at the ages of 5 and 7 with no help from Fuinjutsu to lessen the effects. Not only did they survive, they have complete control of their free will, but still serve me willingly. Anko gasped at them as she began trembling despite her best efforts. No way, that's not possible. Gaara stared at Anko. I cannot see what Orochimaru-sama ever saw in you. You bear the heaven seal, which is directly below ours in power, yet you waste such a gift. How stupid. Gaara extended his hand and a wave of sand came out of his clothes, rushing straight for Anko. Anko dodged it, not realizing that the other had gone until he was behind her. He stabbed her in the back and scowled as she used Kawarimi to exchange herself with a log. Anko reappeared behind him and extended a hand, releasing snakes from her sleeve and entangling him, hurling him to the side. However, during this time, the other hand extended his sand again to grab her leg and throw her against the trunk of the tree, making a crater. Anko was about to get up when she felt the broad-shouldered one appear right in front of her. She tried to get back up but found that the normally yellow sand had turned black and had engulfed her legs and arms. What scared her most, however, was that the sand was actually burning her skin, letting a deadly poison seep into her pores. She hissed as Naruto landed a savage kick to the middle of her chest. She grimaced as she looked up to see the sand retreating as both boys jumped back to Orochimaru's side. As you can see, Anko, this is the kind of power you could have obtained if you had stayed with me. Neither of them were taking you entirely seriously, considering they only activated the first level of the Hell Seal. Anko pulled out a kunai and threw it at Orochimaru, who caught it between two fingers, while walking forward, not breaking his stride. It's useless. Since you have betrayed me, becoming a Tokubetsu Junin of another village, I would prefer it if you did not use my jutsus. Ha! Orochimaru formed a half-ram seal, making Anko seize up in pain as she grabbed her neck. Orochimaru dropped the kunai and walked towards her, stopping right in front of her. She looked at him, just managing to talk despite the pain. Why did you come? We haven't seen each other in so long and you're treating me so coldly. Did you come to assassinate Hokage-sama? Orochimaru smirked. Who knows, however, I was planning on reserving some outstanding ones from this village. Anko grunted as she fell to the ground, his legs unable to hold her up any longer. I just gave someone that same cursed seal as a present a while ago. Orochimaru leaned down in front of Anko, much like a parent would with a child, completely mocking her. There is a boy I want. Anko looked up at him, anger filling her eyes and voice. As usual, you just do what you want, but that boy is going to die. Yes, there is only a 10% chance he will survive, but he might be like you and not die. Anko pressed him for information in the chance she survived. You seem quite interested in this boy. Orochimaru smiled as he answered, placing a hand on Anko's face, making her shudder in disgust. Are you jealous? Are you still angry that I used you and cast you off like trash? Anko sneered at the insult. Unlike you, he seems like an excellent ninja. After all, the boy carried the abilities of an Uchiha. His body is beautiful, and he is capable of becoming my successor. If he survives, things will become interesting. Orochimaru stood and stuck a somewhat dramatic pose. Whatever you do, do not cancel this exam. Orochimaru began walking back to Naruto and Gaara while continuing to talk to Anko. 9 from my village are under your care. I'm going to enjoy this. Orochimaru reached Naruto and Gaara and the three of them turned into flames of purple chakra and disappeared, but Orochimaru's voice still echoed throughout the area. If you take away my joy, it will be over for the village of Konoha. Anko gasped as another painful jolt raced through her body, trying to decide what to do with this new information. Morning, day 5. As they had said, Naruto and Gaara began checking up on their teams on day 5. The first team Naruto found was his own, and was rather shocked to see that they were in bad shape. He jumped down, making the Oto Genin go on guard. Relax you three, it's me. Naruto switched his voice back to his normal one, making the three get out of their stances. Naruto looked over Zaku with a raised eyebrow. What happened to you? Dosu sighed as he explained. Sasuke-kun was given a cursed seal, which he survived and used against us. If it wasn't for his pink-haired teammate, we would be dead. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Of course, he knew he was given it, but he had to play dumb. Is that so? That was not part of the original plan, however, as ninja, you are expected to adapt to any situation put in front of you. You should have retreated, which I can tell you didn't. I work much like our leader does. I give people one chance. Next time, I can't guarantee what will happen to you. Take these and get to the tower. I'll see you there. The three of them nodded as Naruto chucked a pair of scrolls to them. Naruto disappeared, leaving the three Oto Genin to walk the last leg of the journey to the tower. Not too far away, Naruto dumped his borrowed outfit, returning to his Odo Junin disguise. He destroyed the evidence, and approached the tower. He was greeted by a Chunin examiner, who nodded at him. This way please. Naruto walked around the tower to a door that had a sign saying, non-participants entrance, above it. The examiner led Naruto through several corridors into the main arena. All eyes in the room turned to him and scrutinized him. It seemed that Anko had indeed told them about Odo's leader and apprentices, however, they did not move to apprehend him or any others, so it seems that she had also told them about what would happen if they did. Naruto suppressed a smile as he walked up to Anko, who looked up from her clipboard. Team, Abumi Zaku, Kinuta Dosu and Kin Suchi of Odo. Anko checked over her clipboard and nodded. They've just reported in and passed. Naruto nodded and took his place on the other side of his disguised leader from his teammate and friend. They nodded to each other. Naruto saw that the senseis from 4 Konoha teams, 5 if you included Kabuto's sensei, 1 from Suna and the 3 of them from Odo were present. 5 minutes later, the genin came into the room. Anko looked at them. Line up in your teams. All of the teams lined up. The majority of them were looking at Naruto and Gaara in shock and amusement. Naruto heard whispers like, "How can kids like that be a Junin?" And, "I bet Odo doesn't really have any Junins." Naruto smiled as Kabuto corrected them. There are children younger than them who are already Anbu captains. They didn't believe him, but Kiba intervened. Kabuto is right. Akamaru can sense a person's power level by smell. Whoever those two are, they are very powerful, way more powerful than us. Several of the Konoha females still didn't get the message, and brushed them off until the venerable, Uchiha, stepped in. Age means nothing. My brother was an Anbu captain when he was their age. The girls did a full 180 and took full notice of Sasuke. Their actions screamed, naive, letting everyone know they cared more about love than being a ninja. Everyone focused on Anko as she addressed them. Hokage-sama will now give an explanation of the third exam. Naruto could care less. All he was focusing on was the Haruno fawning over the Uchiha. How the hell did she survive an encounter? Scratch that, how the hell did she become a ninja at all? By the time their little spat had finished, so had the Hokage's explanation. Naruto looked to the side as a Konoha Junin appeared in front of the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I, the third examiner, Gekko Hayate will explain the rules of the exam. The Hokage nodded. Please do. Hayate turned around and coughed several times. Pleased to meet you everyone. Before we start, there's something I want you to do. Cough cough. Compete in some preliminary matches. These matches will begin immediately, so anyone who is not feeling well and wishes to quit, please tell me. You can do so without fear of failing your team from now on. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes at Kabuto, who raised his hand. I wish to quit. Everyone looked at Kabuto in disbelief as Hayate looked through his clipboard. Let's see. He flipped over several pages before finding what he wanted. Konoha's Yakushi Kabuto, correct. Very well, you can leave. Kabuto turned and walked out of the hall, smiling to himself. Everyone who was watching his retreating back turned back again as Hayate coughed. The reason for these preliminaries is that the first and second exams may have been too easy this year, but there are far too many of you left to be put into the final knockout tournament. At the final test, many very important people will be there, and we cannot afford to waste their time with endless battles. Please look up there at the scoreboard. It will decide your fate. Anko looked up at the closed panel and whispered into her mic. Open it. The panel slid up and the board flashed before cycling through the names. Naruto smiled at the selection. Uchiha Sasuke vs Akado Yoroi. Sasuke smirked. Right off the bat, huh? Gecko motioned both competitors forward. Both left their teams and stood facing each other. First match participants are Akado Yoroi and Uchiha Sasuke. Are there any objections? Both opponents indicated there was none. We will now begin the first match. Everyone except the two fighters, please vacate the arena and stand with your senseis on the balcony. Once everyone had walked up, Hayate started the match. First match, begin. Yoroi surrounded his hand with chakra while reaching into his ninja pouch. Sasuke pulled out a kunai just as Yoroi hurled a trio of shuriken at him. He gave a grunt of effort as he deflected them back at Yoroi and wobbled as a pulse of pain from the cursed seal went through his body, making him collapse to the ground. He looked up as saw Yoroi was no longer in front of him. He rolled out of the way as Yoroi slammed his palm into the ground. Sasuke stabbed his kunai into the ground to stop his movement and then used it as a pivot to capture Yoroi's leg, making him crash to the ground. Sasuke skillfully placed one leg over his collarbone and the other around his arm, while using his own arms to hold Yoroi's arm in place over his chest. Yoroi smirked as he turned his palm around and grabbed Sasuke's chest and activated his jutsu. Sasuke's eyes shot open as Yoroi deactivated his jutsu. My stamina. Yoroi casually raised his arm and then slammed it down while getting up as if there was no threat to him despite his casual demeanor. He slammed his palm to Sasuke's forehead just as he was getting back up and laughed as Sasuke finally realized what was happening. My chakra, are you? You finally noticed. Sasuke's hands fell off Yoroi's arm as he lost the strength to keep them there. Sasuke growled as he kicked Yoroi in the stomach, sending the older genin stumbling. Both got back to their feet. Yoroi reactivated his chakra-draining jutsu and charged Sasuke, sweeping his hand through the air as he tried to reattach his hand to Sasuke's head. He eventually scored a near hit, just brushing one of Sasuke's bangs, making his younger opponent stumble before regaining his footing. Yoroi smirked at Sasuke, which was hidden behind his sunglasses and mask. What's wrong? Had enough. Sasuke weighed his options as Yoroi charged again, sending strike after strike Sasuke's way, which Sasuke skillfully dodged before he disappeared, much to everyone's surprise. Sasuke reappeared inside Yoroi's guard and gave him a savage kick to the chin, sending him flying before reappearing behind him as they both sailed through the air. Yoroi looked over his shoulder. Leaf Shadow Dance. From here on, it's all original. Sasuke placed two fingers into Yoroi's back. This is the real end. Sasuke froze as the cursed seal activated, making him cough up blood. The pattern of marks that looked like a cross between clouds and fire raced across his skin. The Junins prepared to jump in and stop it when, to their surprise, the seal's effects started retreating. Naruto could see his leader grinning hungrily at his newest target as he prepared to carry out the rest of the jutsu. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Sasuke grabbed Yoroi and started a savage combo, the first of which Yoroi blocked. Not good enough. Sasuke smirked and then brought his other foot around, which Yoroi was not expecting. After several more hits, Sasuke brought his held down and connected it with Yoroi's stomach as he landed, vastly increasing the damage done. Shishi Renden. Sasuke rolled backwards and came to a stop, not moving. Yoroi was also in no condition to move. Hayate closely observed both of them to see if either would get back up. After several seconds, Sasuke shakily rose to a standing position. Hayate checked on Yoroi and confirmed he was out cold. Hayate looked up and coughed, pointing to Sasuke. First match winner, Uchiha Sasuke. Several Konoha genin cheered as Sasuke's sensei poofed down to the arena and supported his student with a knee just as he fell onto his butt. There was a minor argument with the medics that ended up in Kakashi leading Sasuke out of the arena. Hayate coughed, catching everyone's attention. We will now choose the second match participants. The scream flashed before cycling through the names. Abumi Zaku vs Aburame Shino. Both participants' eyes locked, as did their senseis. The female Konoha Junin sized Naruto up while Naruto gave her an "entertain me" look. Zaku smirked as he looked at Shino. Who's the other weakling? Naruto's eyes narrowed as he looked at Zaku. Don't underestimate an opponent for any reason. You should know that better than anyone, Zaku. Zaku snorted at the veiled insult and made his way down to the arena, as did the Aburame. We will now begin the second match. Begin. The Junins in the room absently noticed that Orochimaru used a standard variation of Shushin no Jutsu to cover himself in smoke and disappear. They focused back on the fight. Shino remained stoic as he talked with his opponent. If you choose to fight me here, you will never be able to fight again. Give up. Zaku smirked as he began fumbling with his left arm. Somehow, this one still moves. Zaku pulled his arm out and crouched. One arm will be enough to beat you. Zaku tried to bring his arm around and take a seeping strike at Shino's head, which the Aburame blocked effortlessly with one forearm. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the Aburame's chosen style of warfare begin. You cannot win with a single arm. Zaku snarled as he lost his extremely short temper. Learn your place. Zenkuaha. The Aburame was caught in a particularly violent gust of wind that sent him sprawling, much to most people's shock in the room. Zaku smirked. Smokin'. Shino was in fact doing just that. He was literally steaming from the attack as he lay on the ground. Not too far away in another room, Kakashi was just finishing the last of the blood kanji needed for the fuinjutsu he was about to perform. He stepped back and admired his handiwork. This is going to sting a bit, okay? Sasuke nodded as Kakashi performed a short chain of hand seals. Fuja Hoin. Kakashi placed his hand on Sasuke's cursed seal, making the Uchiha stiffen and then scream as the area was bathed in a wild light. The lines of kanji floated along, disappearing underneath Kakashi's hand. Once the last of them had been set in place, Kakashi lifted his hand and the light died down. Sasuke fell onto his hands and knees as Kakashi explained what he did. If the cursed seal tries to reactivate, the power of the evil suppressor will hold in, but it relies on your will as a power source. Should you ever doubt your own power, the seal will reactivate. Sasuke nodded slightly as he collapsed, completely exhausted. Kakashi stiffened as he heard a voice behind him. So, you can use fuinjutsu now, you've grown, Kakashi-kun. Kakashi whipped around as the figure came into the light, bathed in an aura of disgusting purple chakra which Kakashi would recognize anywhere. Orochimaru. I'm sorry, but I have no business with you. I do with the boy behind you, however. Please step aside. Kakashi steeled his resolve. Why are you after Sasuke? Orochimaru smirked and decided to take this to a personal level. You are lucky, as you got what you wanted already. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. You didn't have that very long ago. The Sharingan in your left eye. Kakashi's eyes widened as he gasped. I want it too. The powers of the Uchiha, that is. Back in the arena, everyone from Konoha looked in horror as their comrade lay on the ground, surrounded by smoke. Zaku took his hand back and smirked. Come on, get back up. People soon became aware of a scurrying noise that was rapidly increasing in volume. Naruto sighed. This is how far Zaku could get. All that he had going for him was realizing the situation he was in and surrendering. What trick are you trying to pull? Naruto cringed. This was making Odo look bad. He had no clue. Zaku looked behind him and saw an army of bugs coming from behind. Shino held up a single bug for Zaku's inspection. These are called Kikai bugs. They will attack their prey in groups and consume their chakra. If I attack you with this many, you will without a doubt never be able to fight again. Zaku looked back at Shino and glared. If you do not want that, then give up. This is the suggested course of action. If you use that move from before, I will have the bugs attack you. If you use the attack on my bugs, I will attack you. Regardless of which choice you make, you cannot win in this situation. Shino formed a Tora seal. You are supposed to keep your trump card until the very end. Naruto saw Zaku's reaction and prepared to step in. He was most likely going to fight. Zaku's scowl turned into a twisted snarl of hatred and rage. Zaku began shaking as he leveled his left arm at Shino, and then ripped out his right arm, forcing it to reveal the air hole. As Naruto expected, it was in the same condition as the other one. Naruto called out to his student. Zaku, enough. You would do well to give up. Back with Kakashi and Orochimaru. What is your purpose? Orochimaru smirked and gave a convoluted answer. The recently made Otogakur no Sato is mine. You understand if I say just that, right? Kakashi snorted at the implications. What a stupid ambition. Orochimaru smirked as well. Urara, that was blunt. But to accomplish that ambition, I need pieces to become my arms and legs and accomplish things for me. Matches. Everyone in the room looked at Naruto, expecting an explanation. Zaku ignored him and began gathering chakra for his attack. Naruto snarled and warped down to the arena, grabbing Zaku by the neck and lifting him off the ground, much to everyone's horror. There were cries of, "He's strangling his own genin," and the like, which Naruto laughed at. Zaku, this punishment is extremely light compared to what you would have just inflicted on yourself. You and your teammates were already on very thin ice, and then you disregarded my orders. Do you know what the punishment for insubordination is in Oto? Kakashi and Orochimaru. So Sasuke is one of those pieces. Orochimaru smiled. Not quite. Sasuke-kun, like the other two Junins with me, are supreme pieces, while the genin taking the exam right now are matches. Zaku couldn't answer, so Naruto answered for him. Death. Everyone gasped as the Junins prepared to interrupt the death penalty when the other remaining Oto Junin called out. Konoha and Suna, this is not your place to interfere. This is an ongoing Oto problem that will be dealt with as our laws dictate. Any act against us now is an act of war, a war which you will not win. Stand down or face the consequences. The Konoha Junin gritted their teeth and stepped back. The Oto Junin was correct. They could do nothing without starting a war. All of the Konoha and Suna genin were shocked and scared out of their minds that Naruto was physically capable of rendering a boy at least a year his senior immobile while he talked to him. The Junin, however, were more shocked that he would do it, rather than simply being capable of it. Zaku stared at Naruto in hatred and managed to gasp out his answer. What the hell, would you know? I had him beat. Naruto snarled as he threw Zaku to the ground, ripping of his Hitai-8 in the process. You have no idea what you were about to do. However, that is not the point. When I give you an order, you will follow it to the letter. I'm surprised you were even given this Hitai-8. You possess mid-genin level power, and sub-genin level analytical abilities. After these preliminaries, I will deal with you. Naruto turned his back and a smirk touched the corner of his mouth as Zaku stood up and glared at his sensei. Most Junins looked at him in shock at such a blatant error on his part. Kiba snorted at him. What kind of a Junin turns his back on an opponent? Kurenai narrowed her eyes. Either a very stupid one or a very confident one. Zaku raised both arms at his sensei and screamed at him. Hook, line and sinker. Don't you dare walk away from me. Kakashi and Orochimaru. Mere sacrifices. Matches. Everyone looked in horror as Zaku's arms exploded at the elbows, sending the bottom half of his arms flying forward and landing on the ground, trailing blood the entire way. Everyone gasped, and many threw up at the two severed halves of the bloody appendages. Naruto turned around and sighed. And that was the exact reason I told you to give up, Zaku. Few in this room noticed until it was brought to this, so let me show you where you went wrong. Naruto walked over to both forearms and casually picked them up, making several others lose their stomach contents. Naruto began his lecture. Firstly, you let both your opponent and myself sucker you into our own paces, throwing logical thinking out the window and giving way to anger. If this had been a real-life battle with an enemy and not a regulated match, you would now be dead. Naruto walked over to the screaming Zaku and showed him the palms of his now severed hands. Zaku gasped as he saw what his sensei had meant. You see now, don't you? That's right, this is the second part of where you went wrong. When you attempted to punch the Aburame, he placed a large portion of his bugs onto you that crawled in between your layers of clothing so as to remain unnoticed by everyone, especially you. After you blasted him with your Zenkuaha, he had the bugs come back out and block your air holes to prevent you using the same attack again. You know what that means. When you tired to use it again, your chakra tubes in your arms could not expel the air, so it sought a way to escape. There was nowhere for it to do so, so it built up in the weakest part of the tubes, the elbows, and continued to expand until it burst, and this is the result. The Aburame had indeed kept his true trump card for last. You failed the most important lesson as a shinobi, Zaku. Look underneath the underneath. Everyone except Gaara stared at this Oto Junin in horror and amazement that he had seen through everything they did not and analyzed it, attempting to stop his student from killing himself, only getting angry when his student had disobeyed the order. They had made a completely incorrect assessment of him, however, his treatment of his student left a lot to be desired. No wonder he was a Junin at such a young age. Naruto dropped Zaku's arms and sighed. Zaku, you cannot use ninjutsu or genjutsu anymore, and almost all taijutsu styles require the use of your arms. Your life as a ninja is over. Kakashi and Orochimaru. Orochimaru started walking towards Kakashi, who thought over his options. Orochimaru made an exaggerated step, which caused Kakashi to go into action, powering up the Reikiri. Don't come any closer to Sasuke. Even if you are one of the former legendary Sannin, I can still sacrifice my life to kill you. Orochimaru froze for a moment before he burst out laughing. Kakashi's eyes narrowed further. What's so funny? Orochimaru smiled at him as he could taste the waves of fear rolling off Kakashi. What comes out of your mouth and what your body is telling me do not agree with each other. Nani. Using that seal is pointless. While it may stop its self-manifestation, it will still seduce him with its power. He has a heart that will seek power, no matter the personal cost, as long as he believes it will help him achieve his revenge. He possesses that kind of disposition. He is an avenger. So you took advantage of that. Still, Sasuke won't. Eventually, he will seek me out. Just as your sensei's legacy has. Kakashi gasped at the revelation. It was common knowledge that Uzumaki Naruto had vanished, but this confirmed those that were close to Arashi's worst fears. Kakashi growled. Where is he? What did you do to him? Orochimaru laughed again. He was a fine research subject, I will give him that. Kakashi gasped at the implications. Orochimaru was well known to kill people and use them as research subjects for his twisted goals. The fact that it had happened to Naruto was heart-wrenching. Kakashi deactivated the Reikiri and fell to the ground. Naruto, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Orochimaru laughed as he turned to leave. You had your chance, Kakashi, and you threw it away. I guess it gives a whole new meaning to the term, chances missed, doesn't it? Orochimaru disappeared, laughing all the way. Kakashi openly sobbed at failing his sensei's last wish. He slammed his fist into a nearby column, smashing it to pieces. Why do I keep failing them? Damn it. Matches. Naruto looked up at the Konoha Junin and smirked in contempt as they gave him calculative glances. Label, that's all they can do. How pathetic. Naruto poofed back up to his team, who gulped and tried not to look too intimidated. Remember you two, you are also skating on thin ice. Don't give me a reason to do what I did with Zaku to you. Hayate checked Zaku and coughed once before looking at Shino. Shosha. Aburame Shino. The medics came onto the field, picking up Zaku's arms and placing the rest of him onto a stretcher. Gaara walked several steps towards Naruto, so now the two remaining Oto Junins were standing in between the three groups of Oto Genin. Gaara looked at Naruto in that completely deadpanned expression he was so famous for. I wonder what she would have said if she saw you do that. Naruto caught on instantly to what Gaara was saying. When she was used without a name, it was always Tayuya. What do you mean? What would she have said? She'd go off on a swearing fit and then hit me over the head. What do you expect? People raised an eyebrow. A woman would go on a swearing fit and then hit him over the head and live. Gaara snorted lightly. I will never understand why a female our age is so violent or foul-mouthed, despite the fact it is somewhat amusing. Naruto shrugged, acutely aware that everyone was looking at them suspiciously. Business is business, pleasure is pleasure. They're mutually exclusive. We can ponder her actions in our own time. Right now. Naruto indicated towards the scoreboard, which had picked the next set of names. We have business to attend to. Gaara nodded and looked over the screen. Indeed. Oto no Beko vs Hyuga Hinata. The massive Oto Nin smiled as he hoisted himself up onto the railing which bent under his weight and jumped down, causing a tremor that was nothing short of an earthquake. Hinata cringed at the sight of her opponent. Both of her teammates wished her luck, so she gathered her resolve and went down to the arena. Hayate stepped forward. The third match between Oto no Beko and Hyuga Hinata. Please begin. Hinata was scared stiff. This boy was so much bigger than her, and no doubt more powerful. Despite the fact that his lower head was heavily bandaged, she could see him smiling. The boy made no move to begin, but spoke to her. I have heard much of the Hyuga. Your style, Jukin adopts the persona of, I am a mountain, I will move for no one, correct? Hinata's eyes widened but nodded, making the Oto Nin smile again. I will educate you on what a mountain really is. Attack me when you wish. Hinata's eyes widened. Anyo, are you not going to attack me? The Nin shook his head. I do not make offensive movements. Hinata gathered her rather weak resolve and activated her clan's Dujutsu. Byakugan. Hinata gasped when she saw her opponent's pathways. They were very different from a regular person's. They were heavily focused around the limbs and neck. The Oto Nin nodded. Correct. Please attack. This Oto Nin's rather formal way of talking was somewhat amusing for most people in the room. Hinata fell into her Jukin stance and charged. The Oto Nin his head to the side before falling onto his stomach and drawing his extremities inside his clothing. Hinata slowed momentarily before speeding back up and aiming a strike directly for where his lower back should be. Ha! The strike connected, but Hinata cried out in pain as she drew back, her finger bones completely broken. No one was more surprised than Neji, who was watching with his own Byakugan activated. Hinata's attack had not even pierced the surface. It was not that her attack was weak, but the shell almost seemed to absorb it and break her fingers at the same time. Everyone heard the Oto Nin's voice from inside his body. Juken is rather ineffective against me, as you can see. My first name is not just for show. Hinata thought about what she could do. A tortoise's back and sides was always very well defended, but its underside was not. The problem was his underside was facing the ground, completely untouchable by any attacks she could throw at him. Now she was wishing she had been allowed to learn some basic elemental jutsus to complement her arsenal. Coming up with an idea, Hinata pulled out an exploding tag with her good hand before charging in. She jumped up, intending to slap the note on his and tell him to give up when she heard a faint whistling noise from below. She saw Beko's shirt start rustling before it exploded off him, ripping into Hinata with jets of air. Hinata screamed in agony as the chakra-infused air blasted past her, ripping her skin, clothes and worst of all, making her temporarily deaf. Hinata fell to the ground and stayed still. Beko brought his limbs and head back out and stood up. His clothes were designed so that only the back would be destroyed when he used his sound jutsu. Beko nodded at her. And neither is my surname. Hinata gritted her teeth as she tried to get back up. All this time, Beko had not even moved from the crater he had landed in when he entered the arena. Beko smiled. Some call that a Zatai Bugyo. No one has put a scratch on me yet, even though I'm nothing but a shield for my comrades. Sorry, Hinata-san, this battle is mine. Hinata was in no position to argue and looked at Hayate. I give up. Hayate nodded and pointed to Beko. Shosha. Beko. Beko bowed to the Hyuga heiress before lumbering back up to his teammates who smiled at him. Hinata was taken out on a stretcher. Hayate coughed, catching the attention of everyone. We will now announce the next match. Everyone looked back up at the board as it flashed and began cycling through names. Gaara raised a hairless eyebrow at the names. Sabaku no Ryukatsu vs Rock Lee. Gaara couldn't help but let out a snort, catching the Suna team's attention that were standing next to him. Carnage of the Sand, let's see what they think. Carnage, really is. Naruto saw that the Suna team was the royal team, consisting of Kankuro, Tamari and a 7-year-old brow-haired boy that had a gourd strapped to his back who looked like he was just holding back from committing a massacre. Much to Gaara's and Naruto's amusement, the 7-year-old, Carnage, warped down to the arena using Gaara's Shushin no Jutsu. Gaara snorted. Seems the case cage still has to learn not to toy with demons. The Suna Junin glared at the insult to their cage. While absolutely true, it was still demeaning. They had tired to keep their experiment, that went by the name of Gaara quiet, but it was still the subject of insults directed their way on many occasions. However, Naruto was drawn back to the Konoha fighter who currently was listening to his older clone of a sensei's lecture and scribbling it down in a notebook. Their voices were impossible not to hear. Lee. There's no time for that now. I don't think anyone has noticed yet, but. Naruto listened in. It couldn't possibly get much worse. That Gorda's suspicions. Gaara for once actually sweat dropped while Naruto completely face-faulted. Both recovered and looked at them to see something that was utterly disturbing. Rock Lee of Konoha was currently hugging his unnervingly ugly sensei in a scene that made Naruto's insides crawl. He was unable to suppress a shudder, which more than one Junin caught and frankly didn't blame him. They were surprised however when he shot every single Konoha Junin a sincere look that screamed, "I feel so sorry for you." Hell, not even Konoha deserved this kind of torture on a daily basis. Eventually, the touching scene stopped and Lee jumped into the arena. Hayate saw they were both ready and started the fight. Lee charged his younger opponent. Somewhat surprised he stood stock still as he unleashed his trademark opening taijutsu move. Konoha Senpu. Much to most people's shock, the gourd exploded into sand and instantly deflected the attack before reforming. Lee continued on with his assault, throwing punches and kicks that would break most people their age. This carnage of the sand could not form sand other than his own gourd, which meant that the cage had sealed a no-name Tanuki into this child in a desperate bid to replace Gaara. Finally, the 7-year-old child went on the move and extended his gourd sand out to try and catch Lee, who backflipped several times before jumping up onto the fingertips of the ram hand seal statue. Naruto saw the Konoha Taijutsu buff's sensei talking to one of Kakashi's genin before giving Lee a thumbs up. "Lee, take them off." Naruto raised an eyebrow. What exactly would he be taking off? Lee looked at his sensei and saluted. "Demo, Guy sensei. I thought that was only permitted when protecting many important people." Guy shoved his thumbs up fist forward to stress his point. "I don't care. I will make an exception." Lee smiled and laughed before sitting and pulling his orange leg warmers down to reveal weights. Most of them didn't think much of it, but Naruto thought better. They wouldn't make such a strict rule for removing them unless. The Oto genin looked at Naruto as Lee pulled off his weights, each of which had the kanji for guts written all over it. Naruto had a gut feeling this was going to be another of their wacky quirks. "Yosh, I can move much easier now." Lee dropped the weights as they sailed towards the ground. When they hit, Naruto's suspicions had been confirmed. Crash! 2 huge plumes of dust and stone rose into the air from the impact of the weights. Practically every single person in the room showed some kind of expression that clearly said, "What the hell?" Naruto shook his head. Bunch of taijutsu freaks. The Junin known as Guy put 2 fingers together and pointed into the arena. "Go, Lee." Lee nodded enthusiastically. "Asu." Lee practically vanished into thin air, much to the majority of people's shock, reappearing behind Ryukatsu and punching straight through the sand barrier. He disappeared again, reappearing on the other side of Ryukatsu to again punch through the sand barrier, disappearing before Ryukatsu could even turn his head fast enough to see him. This went on for around 30 seconds before Lee jumped up, spinning incredibly fast, landing a savage kick to his opponent's head. Ryukatsu recovered, snarling as Lee gave him a punch to the face, sending his junior sprawling. Since Ryukatsu's Tanuki was a lesser one, it did not have armor of sand attached directly to the skin, and so he was bleeding. He got back up and formed a rather strange hand seal, making his gourd explode into a fine sand mist. He grinned manically as he held both hands out. Sabaku Q. The mist of sand that now filled the arena condensed immediately around Lee into a sand coffin as the jutsu name implied. Ryukatsu seemed to struggle to close his fists, and the reason became apparent. The sand was crushing inwards in accordance to how closed his hand was. It seemed that the effects exerted from inside the sand dictated how quickly and powerfully he could crush the sand. Naruto was vaguely aware that Lee's sensei nodded and that a very powerful force was emanating from Lee. Ryukatsu stopped and stared wide-eyed as parts of the sand coffin broke off and heavily chakra-infused wind ripped out. The entire coffin quickly exploded off Lee to reveal parts of the floor were now being ripped out and disintegrated as it rose into the air. Everyone in the room stared in horror as Lee unveiled his new look. His pupil-less eyes and red skin, as well as green aura and blood-red chakra wind exploding off his body gave him an aura that would make most men wet their pants. Naruto remembered a particular lesson Kabuto had given him on nature and its ways of dealing with physical stress. No way. The Oto Genin looked up at Naruto for an explanation. Some plants can turn red as a final method of dealing with abhorrent amounts of physical stress. I didn't know a human could do it. That kid's going to die. The Oto Genin's eyes narrowed and looked back as Lee bent down, unlocking the fourth gate and letting out a primal scream. Naruto stepped back. If Lee ran with this much power, all of you, step back and cover your faces. They nodded and did so, just as Lee charged forward, ripping the ground up underneath him as he landed a savage blow to Ryukatsu's chin, sending dust and stone everywhere, ripping into opponent and bystanders alike. Dosu didn't dare take his eyes off the fight as he called out to his sensei for an explanation. Sensei, what is that kid doing? He's opened 4 of the 8 gates. The genin had been given a brief description on the gates and what they were capable of. The fact that this kid, a genin, could open 4 of them was astounding. Lee reappeared in front of Ryukatsu and began smashing him around the arena. Ryukatsu's blood was flying everywhere, but Lee seemed intent on not stopping until his opponent was defeated. Lee hit the floor, and then the roof, flying straight towards Ryukatsu, who could now barely keep his eyes open. This is the end. Naruto shook his head in disbelief. This kid had already ended his chances of competing in the finals by ripping his muscles to pieces, yet he was intent on opening more gates. To answer his question, Lee was surrounded by a faint blue aura as he punched Ryukatsu, ripping him back up with his medical tape and landing a savage punch, kick to his chest and stomach. Ura Renge. Naruto covered his eyes just as they collided with the ground. Everyone saw Lee roll out of the cloud of debris and come to a stop. When the cloud disappeared, they saw that Ryukatsu was completely broken. His spine was severed, while his limbs were broken. In short, he was dead. Naruto looked at Guy, who was thoroughly distraught. Didn't know the kid had it in him. First kills are always the worst. Even with his gourd protecting his impact slightly, it didn't change the fact that Lee's punches had done enough damage to kill him. Lee slowly got to a kneeling position as he looked what he had done. He looked completely distraught. Naruto couldn't blame him though. Either Lee would have died, or Ryukatsu would have died. There was no other alternative considering how the fight had played out. Lee grabbed his heart and fell to the floor, staying completely still. He was breathing, but it was very shallow and erratic. Hayate looked over each of them. Both participants are unable to continue fighting, therefore no one will progress to the finals from this match. As soon as that was said, Guy jumped down to the arena and checked on his student. Naruto didn't pay attention to the tearful speech, but instead concentrated on Gaara, who was smiling. Naruto whispered just loud enough for him to hear. Nothing like the real thing, is there? Gaara shook his head at the implication. Nothing indeed. The Suna team looked distraught at their lost comrade. Gaara turned to the Suna team, who were practically on the verge of tears. Once the blood had been cleaned off the floor, Hayate coughed and looked up at the board, which flashed and began cycling through the names. It settled on to Kin Tsuchi vs Nara Shikamaru. Dosu warned his female teammate to be careful, while she was full of confidence. Naruto gave her a reproachful look which she ignored and went down to the arena, just as the pineapple-haired Nara stepped down. Naruto watched the fight with mock interest. Inside, he was completely appalled that Kin had ignored the warning he had given her after Zaku's fight. When the Nara caught her and then knocked her out by making her head slam against the back wall, Naruto looked up at his chain-smoking Junin sensei and gave a nod of acknowledgement. The term, tensai, would not even fit this boy. A super genius would be more appropriate. After Ken was carted off, the next match was announced. Oto no Ken vs Yamanaka Ino. Ino looked at the teammate of Beko who nodded to his team and jumped down, thankfully not causing an earthquake this time as he landed. Ino took her time as she walked down the stairs to face her opponent. They stood facing each other. Hayate brought his hand down and jumped back. Please begin. Ino threw 3 shuriken at Ken right off the bat. Ken lazily raised a hand and in a flash of blue light, lowered it, the shuriken either broken or completely twisted beyond use as they clattered to the ground. Ino looked at the boy in shock. What did you? I have my name for a reason. Unlike my teammate Beko, I am almost purely offensive. While Beko has earned the nickname, the immovable object, I have earned the name, the unstoppable force. I will show you why. Ino got into a defensive stance as Ken put his hand out in front of him and focused his arm to shimmer and emit a faint hum. Ken charged, catching Ino by surprise with his speed and took a slice at her head with his hand. Ino just ducked under it, but her hair was not as lucky as he completely severed her ponytail with his hand. Ken jumped back as Ino looked in shock as her hair was falling around her. How did you do that? I didn't see you use a weapon. My body is my weapon. I am able to turn any part of myself into a weapon by emitting vibrations through my body so fast I can cleave metal with my hands or feet. This is why I have earned myself a title on the battlefield. Ino began to see red. If you have so much time to take care of your hair, may I suggest training instead? Ken charged forward, but was forced to stop by something clinging to his legs. He looked down to see Ino had run a trail of chakra through her hair and used it to bind Ken. Ino smirked. You fell for it. I'll make you give up now. Ninpu. Ken's eyes widened as he brought his arm blade in a downwards cut and completely severed the chakra strand just as Ino completed her jutsu. Shintenshin no jutsu. Ken jumped out of the way as Ino's body slumped to the ground. Ken looked at her suspiciously. Some kind of soul or mind transferring jutsu. Ken didn't waste any time as he reappeared right behind her prone body and held a vibrating hand just above her neck and looked at the examiner. I don't know how long she will be out for, but this match is mine. Hayate waited for several seconds, but Ino did not get up, so he straightened and pointed to Ken. Shosha. Ken. Ken walked back up to his teammates while Ino returned to her body after 30 or so seconds. She looked around and sighed, seeing that she had lost. She got up and trudged back to her teammates. Both her teammates and her sensei said she had come up with a very good plan at such short notice. Naruto made no vocal mention of the fact that her very good plan on such short notice would have still ended up with her dead in a real-life situation. If Konoha Genin's confidence was so low as to have to need that, they were a generally weak bunch indeed. Hayate coughed, and the screens began cycling again. Tamari vs Tenten. Tamari saw red when the female of Lee's team was chosen and she smirked at her. Tamari jumped down and stared at the Konoha Kunoichi with a smile that promised pain. Tenten took her place opposite Tamari as Hayate started the match. Hajime. As Naruto predicted, Tamari toyed with her opponent before going in for the kill. After unleashing a Kamedachi, Tamari placed her closed fan on the ground, sticking upright. Tenten fell out of the chakra-infused cyclone and landed back first on the butt of Temari's fan. She coughed out blood and fell limp, much to Temari's amusement. That was boring. Very, very boring. Tamari threw Tenten back towards her side, of the arena and smirked as she hit the ground, being cut by her own weapons before coming to a stop at the wall. Hayate coughed and pointed at Tamari. Since her opponent is no longer conscious, Tamari is the winner. Tamari smiled as she hid behind her fan and disappeared, reappearing with her remaining teammate and sensei. After Tenten's weapons were cleared and she was carted off, Hayate started the selection for the next match. Kankuro vs Tsurugi Masumi. Gaara looked at his former brother disdainfully as he walked down to the arena with his opponent close behind him. Once Hayate had confirmed that both opponents were ready, he started the match. After what most of the genin thought was a cruel, but certain victory when Masumi broke Kankuro's neck, Kankuro's face crumbled before revealing that Kankuro was not the Kankuro they were expecting, but a puppet, which the real Kankuro was controlling from the package that was formerly on his back. Kankuro smirked as he got his own personal revenge for his half-brother's death at the hands of Konoha. You'll be even softer if I break your bones, right? I wonder how soft you'll become if I break your spine and neck. To illustrate his point, Kankuro's puppet snapped Masumi's neck and back before releasing the chakra strings, leaving the now dead Konoha nin and puppet to fall to the ground. Hayate coughed and pointed to Kankuro. Shosha. Kankuro. Kankuro smirked as he grabbed his puppet and walked back up to his team. Hayate started the selection process for the next match with his cough. Oto no Ama vs Shinta. Naruto looked across to the Konoha participant from Team 7. So, it's time to see what my replacement can do. Shinta seemed far too excited to be able to understand the situation he was in. Ama stepped up and stared casually at his opponent who raced down, eager to fight. Naruto's sweat dropped. Would I have been like that? How frightening. Hayate looked at both of them before bringing his hand down to start the match. Please begin when ready. Shinta heffed and smiled confidently. There's no way you can. Shinta didn't even get to finish his sentence as Ama charged in with frightening speed and landed a shoulder charge to Shinta's sternum, sending the boy flying back to impact against the wall. Ama looked at Shinta in a calculative way. Win. It is not a certainty that I will win, however, it is very likely. It is also possible for you to continue this fight. My teammates and I work in perfect synchronization with each other, to the extent that we are almost extensions of each other. However, if separated, we are all still capable of fighting. Now, will you stand up, or will you submit? I do not mind which you chose. Now people could see why each of the three from this boy's team was so unique and specialized. They worked as a sword-shield-armor combination, as their names suggested. Shinta slowly got to his feet, panting. Ama nodded and got into a defensive stance, making a beckoning motion with his hand. Shinta charged in, growing wary when Ama closed his eyes and began to let out a constant, very well modulated hum. Shinta gasped and grabbed his ears as he fell to the floor in obvious pain. Ama stopped and looked at Shinta, who looked back at him with a scared look in his eyes. What the hell did you just do? Ama began an explanation, keeping an eye on Shinta the whole time. Do you know what sound is? Shinta stared at him with an "Are you stupid?" look, which Ama ignored and continued. Sound is merely vibrations. However, in order for sound to travel, it requires a medium of some kind, such as air. Water is a far better medium for sound than air is. A human body consists of around 70% water, making it an ideal amplification and transmission device for sound. I simply use my chakra to redirect my hum through my entire body, turning it into an amplification device, which I am then able to direct at any target I chose, using my chakra to do so. Since I use my chakra to amplify and direct my attacks, my body is unharmed. However, to anyone who is anything but a clone of myself, it can be a minor deterrent, or a force which can rip your entire body apart, depending on how much chakra I decide to use in the process. Now how will you fight? Most of the Junin in the room looked at Amma in amazement. To be able to amplify and direct the vibrations of one's vocal cords should be a physical impossibility. Oto wasn't called that for nothing. Shinta rose shakily and charged, pulling out a kunai and hurling it at Amma, who held out both hands in front of him, making the kunai hit some sort of invisible barrier and drop to the ground. Shinto did not stop as Amma let out a slightly louder hum, making Shinta grab his head and scream in agony, rolling around on the floor before passing out. Amma looked at Hayate, who checked Shinta's vitals before standing up. Amma's opponent is incapacitated, making Amma the winner. Amma walked back up to his teammates while Shinta was carted off. Now, there was only 4 Oto and 4 Konoha nins left to compete. The screen flashed and cycled through to the next pair of names. Dosu Kinuta vs Akamichi Choji. As Naruto predicted, Dosu was able to win with ease, ending the fight by getting the Akamichi stuck in the wall while he transmitted sound throughout his body, essentially cooking him. Like Amma, I can transmit sound through others' bodies, just like I have with you. Earplugs or not, your body is nothing but a giant ear, which I have taken advantage of. Hayate called the match. Shosha. Dosu Kinuta. Once Choji had been taken away, the next match was announced. Oto no Rai vs Hyuga Neji. Neji stepped down and faced off against his opponent. Rai was very familiar with the Hyuga Dujutsu, as they had been thoroughly briefed on the main aspects of Konoha during their history lessons. Neji smirked confidently. You should give up. Destiny has brought us to this battle, and fate has dictated I shall win. Rai raised an eyebrow at this completely arrogant statement. Tell me something. Did this fate tell that you would be blinded by the end of this match? Neji scowled at the implications, settling into his clan's trademark taijutsu stance. Hayate began the match as Neji charged in, Byakugan active and going for a strike to the heart to finish him. However, his opponent made several hand seals and announced his jutsu. Ninpu, Rai no Genwaku. People covered their eyes and ears as the booming sound and blinding light of crashing lightning echoed throughout the arena. When people opened their eyes, they saw Neji looking around desperately with his Byakugan activated. Rai smirked. No point in looking around like that. This isn't a genjutsu, nor was there any lightning. Seems that all-powerful dujutsu of yours isn't all that great. What Rai was not ready for was Neji smirking as he charged in, landing a blow to the Oto nin's heart. Rai coughed up blood and looked up at Neji in shock. How did you? Neji smiled. If I cannot follow you with my eyes, I will follow you by your voice. It is true that I am temporarily blinded because of my proximity to the jutsu, but I have learned to exact location of every single tenketsu in the human body, and judging by the location your voice was coming from, I attacked where the heart should have been. As I have said, fate has decided the outcome of this match. Rai dropped to the floor and stopped moving. Neji smirked and straightened, waiting for the match to be called. Hayate coughed, before pointing to Neji. Shosha. Neji. The medical teams carted Rai away, while the last medic checked Neji's eyes and used a simple healing jutsu to clear his vision. Neji walked back up to where his sensei was, completely wrapped up in his victory and praising looks from Konoha. Hayate coughed, catching everyone's attention as the board began cycling though the names. Genji Udo vs Inazuka Kiba. Kiba walked down to the arena, as did Udo. Both of them faced off, while Hayate started the match. Please begin. Kiba ducked down into a beast-like stance and snarled at his opponent. I don't know what kind of attacks you use, but I'm not going to let you use them. Kiba disappeared, much to his opponent's shock. Udo did not have time to react as he was punched in the gut, sending him flying back and crashing into the wall, before he hopped back out and charged Kiba, who charged straight back at him. Both of their fists impacted each other's faces, sending them sprawling. They got back up and tried again, ending in a much similar result as the last exchange. Kiba snarled as his dog jumped on top of him. Let's do it, Akamaru. Akamaru barked in agreement as Kiba performed his two trademark clan jutsus. Gijyu Ninpu. Shikyaku no Jutsu. Kiba was surrounded by an aura of chakra as his fingernails extended into claws. Once the transformation had finished, he smirked. Gijyu Ninpu. Jujin Bunshin. Both of them were covered in a cloud of smoke, and when it cleared, there was no longer Kiba and his dog, but Kibas. Udo raised an eyebrow at this, but quickly got into a defensive stance. Geez, you don't talk much, do you? That doesn't matter, this is the end. Gatsuga. Both Kiba and the Kiba clone jumped into the air and began spinning fast enough to turn into gray tornadoes, which were directed at Udo. At that point Udo spoke for the first time. This is why I do not speak often. Most people in the room froze as their sense of hearing was completely disorientated from the sound of Udo's voice. Both Kiba and Akamaru went drastically off course, both of them slamming head-on into the walls and falling to the ground. Udo ran up to the temporarily phased Kiba and held a kunai to his neck. He smirked and spoke again. Checkmate. Kiba froze as he suddenly got the worst case of vertigo he had ever received and fell onto all fours, bringing up his stomach contents. Udo stood up and looked at Hayate, who pointed to Udo. Shosha. Udo. Udo walked back up to his teammates, who nodded at him. There was no need to choose the next participants, as there was only 2 left. Both females stepped up as Hayate began to match. Final match. Begin. Sakura took out several shuriken and hurled them at her black-haired opponent. She smirked and jumped to the side. Sakura ran after her, creating 2 bunshins which tried to flank her. Sakura exploded her bunshins just before she got to her opponent, creating a smoke screen. She came out of the smoke screen and punched where the Oto Kunoichi was supposed to be, but was shocked to find she was not there. However, she did hear a whistling sound from her right, and just turned her head enough to see her opponent out of the corner of her eye charging in with speed that put Kiba to shame. Her fist extended and grabbed the back of Sakura's neck. Like my friends up there, I am able to use sound to attack. My methods are not pretty. So, unless you want end up brain dead, I suggest you give up. In this position, Sakura really didn't have a choice. She turned her head slowly and looked at Hayate. Do you wish to give up? Sakura, not trusting her voice, nodded. Shosha. Misato. The dark brown-haired girl let go of Sakura's neck, who gasped as her lungs flooded with much-needed oxygen. Hayate sighed in relief now that his job was essentially over. This concludes the 3rd test's preliminary matches. Could all genin who have progressed please line up down here? We will now give an explanation for the 3rd exam. The 11 present who had passed came down and lined up in front of the 3 examiners and the Hokage. After they were given an explanation as to where and when it would be held as well as why it was so important that it be held, Enko came around to them and let them pull a numbered piece of paper out of the box she was holding. Once all of them had their numbers, they were asked to call them out. Misato. 2. Udo. 7. Dosu. 11. Ama. 1. Ken. 10. Beko. 6. Neji. 5. Konkuro. 3. Tamari. 8. Shikamaru. 9. Shino 4. Enko nodded after she heard their numbers. Which would mean that he's 12. Ibiki, you finished. Ibiki nodded and turned around his clipboard, showing them the line-up for the matches. They nodded as they saw how they were lined up. Some of these matches should be interesting indeed. The Hokage told them to train or rest for the next month and report to the stadium before dismissing them, leaving them to their own devices.